Letter to American Workers by Vladimir Lenin. Written August 20th, 1918. First published in Pravda number 178, August 22nd, 1918. Comrades, a Russian Bolshevik who took part in the 1905 revolution, who lived in your country for many years afterwards, has offered to convey my letter to you. I have accepted his proposal all the more gladly because just at the present time the American revolutionary workers have to play an exceptionally important role as uncompromising enemies of the American imperialists, the freshest, strongest, and latest in joining in the worldwide slaughter of nations for the division of capitalist profits. At this very moment, the American multimillionaires, these modern slave owners, have turned an exceptionally tragic page in the bloody history of bloody imperialism by giving their approval, whether direct or indirect, open or hypocritically concealed, makes no difference, to the armed expedition launched by the brutal Anglo-Japanese imperialists for the purpose of throttling the first socialist republic. The history of modern, civilized America opened with one of those great, really liberating, really revolutionary wars of which there have been so few compared to the vast number of wars of conquest which, like the present imperialist war, were caused by squabbles among kings, landowners, or capitalists over the division of usurped lands or ill-gotten gains. That was the war the American people waged against the British robbers who oppressed America and held her in colonial slavery in the same way as these civilized bloodsuckers are still oppressing and holding in colonial slavery hundreds of millions of people in India, Egypt, and all parts of the world. About 150 years have passed since then. Bourgeois civilization has borne all of its luxurious fruits, and America has taken first place among the free and educated nations in level of development of the productive forces of collective human endeavor, in the utilization of machinery, and of all the wonders of modern engineering. At the same time, America has become one of the foremost countries in regards to the depth of the abyss which lies between the handful of arrogant multimillionaires who wallow in filth and luxury, and the millions of working people who constantly live on the verge of pauperism. The American people, who set the world an example in waging revolutionary war against feudal slavery, now find themselves in the latest capitalist stage of wage slavery to a handful of multimillionaires, and find themselves playing the role of hired thugs who, for the benefit of wealthy scoundrels, throttled the Philippines in 1898 on the pretext of liberating them, and are throttling the Russian Socialist Republic in 1918 on the pretext of protecting it from the Germans. The 4 years of the imperialist slaughter of nations, however, have not passed in vain. The deception of the people by the scoundrels of both robber groups, the British and the German, has been utterly exposed by indisputable and obvious facts. The results of the 4 years of war have revealed the general law of capitalism as applied to war between robbers for the division of spoils. The richest and strongest profited and grabbed the most, while the weakest were utterly robbed, tormented, crushed, and strangled. The British imperialist robbers were the strongest in number of colonial slaves. The British capitalists have not lost an inch of their territory, i.e., territory they have grabbed over the centuries, but have grabbed all the German colonies in Africa. They have grabbed Mesopotamia and Palestine. They have throttled Greece and have begun to plunder Russia. The German imperialist robbers were the strongest in organization and discipline of their armies, but weaker in regard to colonies. They have lost all their colonies, but plundered half of Europe and throttled the largest number of small countries and weak nations. What a great war of liberation on both sides! How well the robbers of both groups, the Anglo-French and the German capitalists, together with their lackeys, the social chauvinists, i.e. the socialists who went over to the side of their own bourgeoisie, have defended their country. The American multimillionaires were, perhaps, richest of all, and geographically the most secure. They have profited more than all the rest. They have converted all, even the richest countries, into their tributaries. They have grabbed hundreds of billions of dollars, and Every dollar is sullied with filth. The filth of the secret treaties between Britain and her allies, between Germany and her vessels, treaties for the division of the spoils, treaties of mutual aid for oppressing the workers and persecuting the internationalist socialists. Every dollar is sullied with the filth of profitable war contracts, which in every country made the rich richer and the poor poorer. And every dollar is stained with blood, by the ocean of blood that has been shed by the 10 million killed and 20 million maimed in the great, noble, liberating, and holy war to decide whether the British or the German robbers are to get most of the spoils, whether the British or the German thugs are to be foremost in throttling the weak nations all over the world. While the German robbers broke all records in war atrocities, the British have broken all records not only in the number of colonies they have grabbed, but also in the subtlety of their disgusting hypocrisy. This very day, the Anglo-French and American bourgeois newspapers are spreading, in millions and millions of copies, lies and slander about Russia and are hypocritically justifying their predatory expedition against her on the plea that they want to protect Russia from the Germans. It does not require many words to refute this despicable and hideous lie. It is sufficient to point to one well-known fact. In October 1917, after the Russian workers had overthrown their imperialist government, the Soviet government, the government of the revolutionary workers and peasants, openly proposed a just peace, a peace without annexations or indemnities, a peace that fully guaranteed equal rights to all nations, and it proposed such a peace to all the belligerent countries. It was the Anglo-French and the American bourgeoisie who refused to accept our proposal. It was they who even refused to talk to us about a general peace. It was they who betrayed the interest of all nations. It was they who prolonged the imperialist slaughter. It was they who, banking on the possibility of dragging Russia back into the imperialist war, refused to take part in the peace negotiations and thereby gave a free hand to the no less predatory German capitalists who imposed the annexations and harsh Brest Peace upon Russia. It is difficult to imagine anything more disgusting than the hypocrisy with which the Anglo-French and American bourgeoisie are now blaming us for the Brest Peace Treaty. The very capitalists of those countries, which could have turned the Brest negotiations into general negotiations for a general peace, are now our accusers. The Anglo-French imperialist vultures, who have profited from the plunder of colonies and the slaughter of nations, have prolonged the war for nearly a whole year after the Brest, and yet they accuse us. The Bolsheviks, who proposed a just peace to all countries, they accuse us, who tore up, published, and exposed to public disgrace the secret criminal treaties included between the ex-Tsar and the Anglo-French capitalists. The workers of the whole world, no matter in what country they live, greet us, sympathize with us, applaud us for breaking the iron ring of imperialist ties, of sordid imperialist treaties, of imperialist chains, for breaking through to freedom and making the heaviest sacrifices in doing so. For, as a socialist republic, although torn and plundered by the imperialists, keeping out of the imperialist war and raising the banner of peace, the banner of socialism for the whole world to see. Small wonder that the international imperialist gang hates us for this, that it accuses us, that all the lackeys of the imperialists, including our right socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks, also accuse us. The hatred these watchdogs of imperialism express for the Bolsheviks and the sympathies of the class-conscious workers of the world convince us more than ever of the justice of our cause. A real socialist would not fail to understand that for the sake of achieving victory over the bourgeoisie, for the sake of power passing to the workers, for the sake of starting the world proletarian revolution, we cannot and must not hesitate to make the heaviest sacrifices, including the sacrifices of part of our territory, the sacrifice of heavy defeats at the hand of imperialism. A real socialist would have proved by deeds his willingness for his country to make the greatest sacrifice to give a real push forward to the cause of the socialist revolution. For the sake of their cause, that is, for the sake of winning world hegemony, the imperialists of Britain and Germany have not hesitated to utterly ruin and throttle a whole number of countries, from Belgium and Serbia to Palestine and Mesopotamia. But must socialists wait with their cause, the cause of liberating the working people of the whole world from the yoke of capital, of winning universal and lasting peace, until a path without sacrifice is found? Must they fear to open the battle until an easy victory is guaranteed? Must they place the integrity and security of their bourgeois-created fatherland above the interests of the world's socialist revolution? The scoundrels in the international socialist movement who think this way, those lackeys who grovel to bourgeois morality, thrice stand condemned. The Anglo-French and American imperialist vultures accuse us of concluding an agreement with German imperialism. What hypocrites, what scoundrels they are to slander the workers' government while trembling because of the sympathy displayed towards us by the workers of their own countries. But their hypocrisy will be exposed. They pretend not to see the difference between an agreement entered into by socialists with the bourgeoisie, their own or foreign, against the workers, against the working people, and an agreement entered into for the protection of the workers who have defeated their bourgeoisie, with the bourgeoisie of one national color against the bourgeoisie of another color, in order that the proletarian may take advantage of the antagonisms between the different groups of bourgeoisie. In actual fact, every European sees this difference very well, and, as I shall show in a moment, the American people have had a particularly striking illustration of it in their own history. There are agreements and agreements. There are faggots and faggots, as the French would say. When in February 1918, the German imperialist vultures hurled their forces against unarmed, demobilized Russia, who had rallied on the international solidarity of the proletariat before the world revolution had fully matured, I did not hesitate for a moment to enter into an agreement with the French monarchists. Captain Sedol, a French army officer who in words sympathized with the Bolsheviks, but was in deeds a loyal and faithful servant of French imperialism, brought the French officer de Lubersac to me. I am a monarchist. My only aim is to secure the defeat of Germany, de Lubersac declared to me. That goes without saying. Cela va sans dire, I replied, but this did not in the least prevent me from entering into an agreement with de Lubersac concerning certain services that French army officers, experts in explosives, were ready to render us by blowing up railway lines in order to hinder the German invasion. This is an example of an agreement of which every class-conscious worker will approve, an agreement in the interest of socialism. The French monarchist and I shook hands, although we knew that each of us would willingly hang his partner. But for a time our interests coincided. Against the advancing rapacious Germans, we, in the interest of the Russian and the world socialist revolution, utilized the equally rapacious counter-interest of other imperialists. In this way we serve the interest of the working class of Russia and of other countries. We strengthen the proletariat and weaken the bourgeoisie of the whole world. We resorted to the methods, most legitimate and essential in every war, of maneuver, stratagem, retreat, in anticipation of the moment when the rapidly maturing proletarian revolution in a number of advanced countries completely matured. However much of the Anglo-French and American imperialist sharks fume with rage, however much they slander us, no matter how many millions they spend on bribing the right socialist revolutionary, the Menshevik and other social patriotic newspapers, I shall not hesitate 1 second to enter into a similar agreement with the German imperialist vultures if an attack upon Russia by Anglo-French troops calls for it. And I know perfectly well that my tactics will be approved by the class-conscious proletariat of Russia, Germany, France, Britain, America, in short, of the whole civilized world. Such tactics will ease the task of the socialist revolution, will hasten it, will weaken the international bourgeoisie, will strengthen the position of the working class which is defeating the bourgeoisie. The American people resorted to these tactics long ago to the advantage of their revolution. When they waged their great war of liberation against the British oppressors, they had also against them the French and the Spanish oppressors who owned a part of what is now the United States of North America. In their arduous war for freedom, the American people also entered into agreements with some oppressors against others for the purpose of weakening the oppressors and strengthening those who were fighting in a revolutionary manner against oppression for the purpose of serving the interest of the oppressed people. The American people took advantage of the strife between the French, the Spanish, and the British. Sometimes they even fought side by side with the forces of the French and Spanish oppressors against the British oppressors. First they defeated the British and then freed themselves, partly by ransom, from the French and the Spanish. Historical action is not the pavement of Nevsky Prospect, said the great Russian revolutionary Chernyshevsky. A revolutionary would not agree to a proletarian revolution only on the condition that it proceeds easily and smoothly, that there is from the outset combined action on the part of proletarians of different countries, that there are guarantees against defeats, that the road of the revolution is broad, free, and straight, that it will not be necessary during the march to victory to sustain the heaviest casualties, to bide one's time in a besieged fortress, or to make one's way along extremely narrow, impassable, winding, and dangerous mountain tracks. Such a person is no revolutionary. He has not freed himself from the pedantry of the bourgeois intellectuals. Such a person will be found constantly slipping into the camp of the counter-revolutionary bourgeoisie, like our right socialist revolutionaries, Mensheviks, and even, although more rarely, left socialist revolutionaries. Echoing the bourgeoisie, these gentlemen like to blame us for the chaos of the revolution, for the destruction of industry, for the unemployment and the food shortage. How hypocritical these accusations are, coming from those who welcomed and supported the imperialist war, or who entered into an agreement with Kerensky who continued this war. It is this imperialist war that is the cause of all these misfortunes. The revolution engendered by the war cannot avoid the terrible difficulties and suffering bequeathed it by the prolonged, ruinous, reactionary slaughter of the nations. To blame us for the destruction of industry, or for the terror, is either hypocrisy or dull-witted pedantry. It reveals an inability to understand the basic conditions of the fierce class struggle raised to the highest degree of intensity that is called revolution. Even when accusers of this type do recognize the class struggle, they limit themselves to verbal recognition. Actually, they constantly slip into the Philistine utopia of class agreement and collaboration. For in revolutionary epochs, the class struggle has always, inevitably, and in every country, assumed the form of civil war, and civil war is inconceivable without the severest destruction, terror, and the restrictions of formal democracy in the interests of this war. Only unctuous parsons, whether Christian or secular, in the persons of parliamentary socialists, cannot see, understand, and feel this necessity. Only a lifeless man in the muffler can shun the revolution for this reason instead of plunging into battle with the utmost ardor and determination at a time when history demands that the greatest problems of humanity be solved by struggle and war. The American people have a revolutionary tradition which has been adopted by the best representatives of the American proletariat, who have repeatedly expressed their complete solidarity with us Bolsheviks. That tradition is the war of liberation against the British in the 18th century and the Civil War in the 19th century. In some respects, if we only take into consideration the destruction of some branches of industry and of the national economy, America in 1870 was behind 1860. But what a pedant, what an idiot would anyone be to deny on these grounds the immense world historic, progressive, and revolutionary significance of the American Civil War of 1863 through 1865. The representatives of the bourgeoisie understand that for the sake of overthrowing Negro slavery, of overthrowing the rule of the slave owners, it was worth letting the country go through long years of civil war, through the abysmal ruin, destruction, and terror that accompany every war. But now, when we are confronted with the vastly greater task of overthrowing capitalist wage slavery, of overthrowing the rule of the bourgeoisie, now the representatives and defenders of the bourgeoisie, and also the reformist socialists who have been frightened by the bourgeoisie and are shunning the revolution, cannot and do not want to understand that civil war is necessary and legitimate. The American workers will not follow the bourgeoisie. They will be with us for civil war against the bourgeoisie. The whole history of the world and of the American labor movement strengthens my convictions that this is so. I also recall the words of one of the most beloved leaders of the American proletariat, Eugene Debs, who wrote in the Appeal to Reason, I believe towards the end of 1915, in the article, What Shall I Fight For? I quoted this article at the beginning of 1916 at a public meeting of workers and burn Switzerland, that he, Debs, would rather be shot than vote credits for the present criminal and reactionary war, that he, Debs, knows of only one holy and, from the proletarian standpoint, legitimate war, namely, the war against the capitalists, the war to liberate mankind from wage slavery. I am not surprised that Wilson, the head of the American multimillionaires and servant of the capitalist sharks, has thrown Debs into prison. Let the bourgeoisie be brutal to the true internationalists, to the true representatives of the revolutionary proletariat. The more fierce and brutal they are, the nearer the day of the victorious proletarian revolution. We are blamed for the destruction caused by our revolution. Who are the accusers? The hangers-on of the bourgeoisie, of that very bourgeoisie who, during the 4 years of the imperialist war, have destroyed almost the whole of European culture and have reduced Europe to barbarism, brutality, and starvation? These bourgeoisie now demand we should not make a revolution on these ruins, amidst this wreckage of culture, amidst the wreckage and ruins created by the war, nor with the people who have been brutalized by the war. How humane and righteous the bourgeoisie are! Their servants accuse us of resorting to terror. The British bourgeoisie have forgotten their 1649. The French bourgeoisie have forgotten their 1793. Terror was just and legitimate when the bourgeoisie resorted to it for their own benefit against feudalism. Terror became monstrous and criminal when the workers and poor peasants dared to use it against the bourgeoisie. Terror was just and legitimate when used for the purpose of substituting one exploiting minority for another exploiting minority. Terror became monstrous and criminal when it began to be used for the purpose of overthrowing every exploiting minority, to be used in the interest of the vast actual majority, in the interest of the proletariat and semi-proletariat, the working class and the poor peasants. The international imperialist bourgeoisie have slaughtered 10 million men and maimed 20 million in their war. The war to decide whether the British or the German vultures are to rule the world. In our war, the war of the oppressed and exploited against the oppressors and the exploiters results in 500,000 or 1 million casualties in all countries. The bourgeoisie will say that the former casualties are justified while the latter are criminal. The proletariat will have something entirely different to say. Now, amidst the horrors of the imperialist war, the proletariat is receiving a most vivid and striking illustration of the great truth taught by all revolutions and bequeathed to the workers by their best teachers, the founders of modern socialism. This truth is that no revolution can be successful unless the resistance of the exploiters is crushed. When we, the workers and toiling peasants, captured state power, it became our duty to crush the resistance of the exploiters. We are proud we have been doing this. We regret we are not doing it with sufficient firmness and determination. We know that fierce resistance to the socialist revolution on the part of the bourgeoisie is inevitable in all countries, and that this resistance will grow with the growth of this revolution. The proletariat will crush the resistance. During the struggle against the resisting bourgeoisie, it will finally mature for victory and for power. Let the corrupt bourgeoisie press shout to the whole world about every mistake our revolution makes. We are not daunted by our mistakes. People have not become saints because the revolution has begun. The toiling classes who for centuries have been oppressed, downtrodden, and forcibly held in the vice of poverty, brutality, and ignorance cannot avoid mistakes when making a revolution. And, as I pointed out once before, the corpse of bourgeois society cannot be nailed in a coffin and buried. The corpse of capitalism is decaying and is disintegrating in our midst, polluting the air and poisoning our lives, enmeshing that which is new, fresh, young, and virile in thousands of threads and bonds of which is old, morbid, and decaying. For every 100 mistakes we commit, in which the bourgeoisie and their lackeys, including our own Mensheviks and right socialist revolutionaries, shout about the whole world, 10,000 great and heroic deeds are performed, greater and more heroic because they are simple and inconspicuous amidst the everyday life of a factory district or a remote village, performed by people who are not accustomed and have no opportunity to shout to the whole world about their successes. But even if the contrary were true, although I know such an assumption is wrong, even if we committed 10,000 mistakes for every 100 correct action we performed, even in that case, our revolution would be great and invincible. And so it will be in the eyes of world history, because, for the first time, not the minority, not the rich alone, not the educated alone, but the real people, the vast majority of the working people, are themselves building a new life, are by their own experience solving the most difficult problems of socialist organization. Every mistake committed in the course of such work, in the course of this most conscientious and earnest work of tens of millions of simple workers and peasants in reorganizing their whole life, every such mistake is worth thousands and millions of lawless successes achieved by the exploiting minority. Successes in swindling and duping the working people. For only through such mistakes will the workers and peasants learn to build the new life, learn to do without capitalists. Only in this way will they hack a path for themselves through thousands of obstacles to victorious socialism. Mistakes are being committed in the course of their revolutionary work by our peasants, who at one stroke, in one night, October 25th and 26th, old style, 1917, entirely abolished the private ownership of land, and are now, month after month, overcoming tremendous difficulties and correcting their mistakes themselves, solving in a practical way the most difficult tasks of organizing new conditions of economic life, of fighting the kulaks, providing land for the working people and not for the rich, and of changing to communist large-scale agriculture. Mistakes are being committed in the course of their revolutionary work by our workers, who have already, after a few months, nationalized almost all the biggest factories and plants, and are learning by hard, everyday work the new task of managing whole branches of industry, are setting the nationalized enterprises going, overcoming the powerful resistance of inertia, petty bourgeois mentality, and selfishness, and, brick by brick, are laying the foundation of new social ties, of a new labor discipline, of a new influence of the workers' trade unions over their members. Mistakes are committed in the course of their revolutionary work by our Soviets, which were created as far back as 1905 by a mighty upsurge of the people. The Soviets of workers and peasants are a new type of state, a new and higher type of democracy, a form of the proletarian dictatorship, a means of administering the state without the bourgeoisie and against the bourgeoisie. For the first time, democracy is here serving the people, the working people, and has ceased to be democracy for the rich as it still is in all bourgeois republics, even the most democratic. For the first time, the people are grappling on a scale involving 100 million with the problem of implementing the dictatorship of the proletariat and semi-proletariat, a problem which, if not solved, makes socialism out of the question. Let the pedants, or the people whose minds are incurably stuffed with bourgeois, democratic, or parliamentary prejudices, shake their heads in perplexity about our Soviets, about the absence of direct elections, for example. These people have forgotten nothing and have learned nothing during the period of the great upheavals of 1914 through 1918. The combination of the proletarian dictatorship with the new democracy for the working people, of civil war with the widest participation of the people in politics. Such a combination cannot be brought about at one stroke, nor does it fit in with the outworn modes of routine parliamentary democracy. The contours of a new world, the world of socialism, are rising before us in the shape of the Soviet Republic. It is not surprising that this world does not come into being ready-made, does not spring forth like Minerva from the head of Jupiter. The old bourgeois democratic constitutions waxed eloquent about formal equality and rights of assembly, but our proletarian and peasant Soviet constitution cast aside the hypocrisy of formal equality. When the bourgeois republicans overturned thrones, they did not worry about formal equality between monarchists and republicans. When it is a matter of overthrowing the bourgeoisie, only traitors or idiots can demand formal equality of rights for the bourgeoisie. Freedom of assembly for workers and peasants is not worth a farthing when the best buildings belong to the bourgeoisie. Our Soviets have confiscated all the goods belonging in town and country from the rich and have transferred all of them to the workers workers and peasants for their unions and meetings. This is our freedom of assembly for the working people. This is the meaning and content of our Soviet, our socialist constitution. This is why we are also firmly convinced that no matter what misfortunes may still be in store for it, our Republic of Soviets is invincible. It is invincible because every blow struck by frenzied imperialism, every defeat the international bourgeoisie inflict on us, rouses more and more sections of the workers and peasants to the struggle, teaches them at the cost of enormous sacrifice, steels them and engenders new heroism on a mass scale. We know that help from you will probably not come soon, comrade American workers, for the revolution is developing in different countries, in different forms, and at different tempos, and it cannot be otherwise. We know that although the European proletarian revolution has been maturing very rapidly lately, it may, after all, not flare up within the next few weeks. We are banking on the inevitability of the world revolution, but this does not mean that we are such fools as to bank on the revolution inevitability coming on a definite and early date. We have seen two great revolutions in our country, 1905 and 1917, and we know revolutions are not made to order or by agreement. We know that circumstances brought our Russian detachment of the socialist proletariat to the fore not because of our merits, but because of the exceptional backwardness of Russia, and that before the world revolution breaks out, a number of separate revolutions may be defeated. In spite of this, we are firmly convinced that we are invincible, because the spirit of mankind will not be broken by the imperialist slaughter. Mankind will vanquish it, and the first country to break the convict chains of the imperialist war was our country. We sustained enormously heavy casualties in the struggle to break these chains, but we broke them. We are free from imperialist dependence. We have raised the banner of struggle for the complete overthrow of imperialism for the whole world to see. We are now, as it were, in a besieged fortress, waiting for the other detachments of the world socialist revolution to come to our relief. These detachments exist. They are more numerous than ours. They are maturing, growing, gaining more strength the longer the brutalities of imperialism continue. The workers are breaking away from their social traitors, the Gomperses, Hendersons, Renaudels, Shadamans, and Renners. Slowly but surely, the workers are adopting communist Bolshevik tactics and are marching towards the proletarian revolution, which alone is capable of saving dying culture and dying mankind. In short, we are invincible because the world proletarian revolution is invincible.